Okay, hello, good morning. I'm insanely tired today. My brother and his wife visited us yesterday, slept over, so it got a little bit late, and then I couldn't sleep. So I have like 5 hours sleep tonight, and that your brain literally hurts. That kind of tired, but I think maybe we'll get through this, because what we plan to do, by the way, the audio has been like an issue, so I think it's because I have like the input volume of my microphone too high, so I've been lowering it a little bit, so hopefully we have a balance where it's not like too low for you to hear and still have like good quality. But I'll do some more experimentation with that so we find a good quality for the audio. Anyways, what we talked about last time was that we wanted to change the styled API of stitches. And what we did first is to fix the typing. As I mentioned, that's how I kind of work with libraries related to typing. I do the typing first. And maybe we can just take a look at it, how it works. So if we go down here, we are supposed to be able to like create a button. And let's see, yeah, it's working. So we can have like a style button, and then we get our CSS instance, which allows us to compose together different things. And then what we added was the ability to add variants, because we removed the concept of props. And like a short summary of that is because allowing props inside these styled APIs can cause performance issues, and it also causes issues with props being passed down to the DOM elements and stuff. So we are kind of exploring how you can make a style component dynamic, but you do it from where you consume the component. So instead of passing in props, you change the variants of the styling from where you consume it. And these variants are defined here as a second argument. So we could say like we want a variant named variant, for example, variant. Oops. And then we want to give it the different values. So for example, we can do like secondary. And then on secondary, we should get the CSS thing again, and we do. And we can say color blue in this case. Yeah, we could, like, we don't have to use compose when we actually just have one value, so we can do this. Okay, so this is the API surface. That's how you consume it. And now we actually have to implement this. And the current implementation looks something like this. So the way Stitches works is that you create, maybe we can look at the documentation. Stitches, is it in here? Stitches, yeah. So we have style. So the way it works is that, let's see, CSS, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, so here we just consume it directly, but what you would typically do is to configure it, because then you can add your custom tokens and screens and utility functions and stuff like that. So you call this create styled, and that gives you the provider, which should have the CSS instance. And then you have use CSS, which allows you to use that instance inside your components, which is also what styled uses. It uses the CSS instance from the context, and then of course the styled API itself. So yeah, so why do we pass the CSS instance through the context of React? And this is a kind of a difficult thing to choose, because it can be a little bit confusing that you have to use like providers and stuff. But we do that to support libraries. So if you were to consume a library built on Stitches, that library could safely just use CSS. And whatever instance was provided by the creator of the app, That's the instance the library will use as well. So it would kind of take into account all the tokens and theming, which is coming very soon, and stuff like that. Okay, so what we need to do here, let's see. Create styled. So we have like a scope here where we define like a current as a variable. Not sure why we do that, I can't remember, but we'll figure that out. Then we create a React context, which holds the CSS instance. Then we create a little hook to actually use that instance. And then the provider instance, what the hell is this? Oh yeah, provider instance is the provider component. Instance was a little bit weird. It should be named component. Maybe we should rename that. Or maybe we can use this fancy rename symbol, provider component. Yeah, so this is the provider component that takes a CSS prop, and yeah, the children are there. Cool. Not sure why I don't use JSX syntax here. That's kind of weird. Yeah, let's do that instead. Context.provider value is CSS, and then we have children there. Yeah, it's funny. Okay, so we have our provider component, and then we have, oh, is it yelling? Oh yeah, okay, it was some config. I guess I can just change it. Oh no, I have like, this is a mono repo, so I don't want to mess around with it. Let's just do this for now. It's the same thing. Cool. Yes, and then we have the styled instance itself, and currently it's grabbing args. And the reason it does that is because it's dynamic. It might have one argument or it might have two arguments, and it changes its behavior based on that. Now we can safely change this and be explicit. Yes, so the first argument will always be the base styling. And again, as I said, when I implement stuff, I'm very, like I use any all over, because for me, it just takes so much time away from implementing it to try to make it type safe internally, because the libraries I create are typically quite simple. Like this one, it's just a few lines of code, and it takes me hours to make it type safe. And I just don't want to spend that time. Okay, so we have our base styling, and then we have our variants. Yes, but I guess we can do this a little bit of typing. Yeah, actually, in this case, well, we'll see. Variant name string. Oops. Name string, and we'll just use any now. Maybe we'll create a type for this. Anyways, and then yes, so we have our styled instance here, which, yeah, oh yeah, that's why we have the current as, because we use a proxy to handle picking up all the different element types. So as I said, like on styled, you can do like div or a or whatever you want here, and we can't implement all those properties. Like the library would be huge, so we're using a proxy to do that. So whenever we try to access a property, we make that the current type of element, the current as property. And then we return the styled instance, because you will call that, and then when you call it, it knows that it's in the context of whatever you chose, like div or a or whatever. So that's just a little trick to basically put the library in the correct context when you dot into it. So that's what we're doing here. when we eventually actually do call it, so again, at this point, we have just dotted into, for example, style.div. Now we're inside here. Now this function runs, it knows that it's a div, it sets the div, and then it returns the instance. So when we call that instance now, the library knows about being in a div context. So you could mess this up by doing like crazy shit like const foo style.div, and then like you did bar styled a, and then you would do foo like this. Then you would mess up the context, but you don't write your code like that. So yeah. We don't care about that. Okay, so we have called the styled instance. We want to return a component from this. So we set the current as, and then we return that component. It receives like any number of props. And then we need to grab the CSS instance. So the callback here now would be like the base. Yeah, so we don't actually, yeah, we don't need any of these props to pass and stuff like that. This is nice. We can just remove all of this stuff. Oh, away with you. And then props to pass will just be props. And let's see, what's this thing? So we're passing in, oh yeah, here we're passing in the props, which we don't need to do anymore. We're just calling the thing. So class, let's see, class name. Yeah, I think that's it. Yeah, and it's not CB, it's base styling. So that is like, as I mentioned, let's keep just jumping down to the API so that we all follow along here. So what we're doing when we're calling the base styling is that we're calling this callback here, the CSS. We're passing in the CSS instance, and that returns like a kind of a string. It's we call it an atom, which is stringifiable. Okay, but we want to have these variants. So now it's getting interesting. I have not thought about how to deal with this at all, so we'll just have to go through the thinking here together. Okay, so the question is how, what do we do with these variants? Do we, first of all, when do we create them? Okay, let's just do, typically when I'm a little bit unsure how to do something, I just start implementing with one approach, and then it typically becomes more clear to me how to do it. So at least we know we want to point to the variants, and we kind of want to collect them, because as I said, everything's static, so we can just go and collect all the styles, and we can keep them in, keep them here. Let's see. Maybe we could, yeah, I guess we want to reduce over them. So basically we want to convert this variants structure into their, like we just want to call the functions and put their return value there. And a way to do that is to use reducers. Sometimes I don't like reducers because I think the code becomes a little bit more complicated, like harder to read. So maybe we should do that. Yeah, let's not do that. Let's just do this very straightforward. So we want our evaluated variants. It's just an object. And then we will object.keys variants for each variant. We want to go through object.keys. let's see. Yeah, we want to go through the variants variant, because then we get the actual what should we call it? Not variant. Let's call this variant name, and then this is the actual variant. So let's move down here so we have an example. So if I were to write something like I'm going to call the variant and then secondary, let's do something so we don't like when going through examples and stuff, we should avoid using the same word for multiple things. So let's just call it size. So we say small, and that is like CSS font size 2 pixels. So we have a variant called size, and then one of those variants is named small. So what we're doing here is that we're iterating. Here we will get like size, and then we will get small here, and then the evaluated variants. Yeah, so up here we want to say evaluated variants, variant name will be an empty object, and then we will be able to safely add the variant by calling it variant, and let's see, and then pass in the instance, and that should return our evaluated my typing is really blah blah blah. My typing is a little bit slow here. I think it's my computer is like running. I'm running OBS doing the streaming there, and also I think I'm running like the Code Sandbox workflow in the background. And yes, cool. So we have that stuff. So now we have the evaluated variants, and now we have to figure out if we actually want to use them. So let's create a class name, constant, and we just use compose, no matter. And we always want to compose in the base styling. So this is the thing with stitches. It's like you can compose compositions. So basically you can do CSS compose, CSS compose, CSS compose. It can go forever. So that's how you kind of put stuff together. Yes, so we have our base styling, and then we want to add other stuff. So how should we do that? How should we figure out? So basically we want to go through, first we want to go through the variants to figure out, are any of these variants defined on the props? Just wondering how we should express it. Are any of... Yeah, so we can do like, I really like being more explicit. So we can say compositions, we can do like an array there. And then we know that we at least want the base styling. And then we can rather just spread those composition. Compositions. This only is happen once, right? Yes, exactly. So yes, yeah. So we're going to check the props and their values here, and as also Fabrice mentions here, who actually did a lot of the work in stitches, is that this only needs to happen once. And this is the really cool thing that we can do, is that even though, so whenever you use this component, it will re-render or reconciliate multiple times, but we don't have to kind of reconciliate the code we're writing here. This actually only needs to happen once. So what my thought is that after we've written this code, we can put all of this logic inside a use memo. And then that will only run the first time, and then we will have our evaluated variants from the memo, and that will like never update. So we can just use the evaluated variants, and then the only thing we compose together are the different class names. Yeah, exactly. So yeah, we need all the available variants and check if it exists as a prop, and if it has a value. That's right. So we'll do that like super explicitly now, and then we'll go into the optimizations and maybe even refactor some code. So a super straightforward way to do this is to, let's see, class name. A super straightforward way to do this is to yet again go through the variants for each. Like we can, like, should we go through the variants or should we go through the props? Yeah, I guess it doesn't really matter. Let's just, yeah, even the composition can be memoized. Oh yeah, that's true. Yeah, though, yeah, can the composition be memoized? Because the composition changes based on the props you pass in. But yeah, we'll talk more about that. So we try to optimize this as much as possible. But let's now, yeah, so we can do this in two ways. We can go through the variants and see if does the variant exist on the prop, or we could go through the prop and we can see if a prop key exists as a variant. But we'll go through the variants here. And I'm still just implementing it straight away, and then we'll see later if we can optimize this. So we have like variant name, and then if prop, well, what I like to do is to say if variant name in props. The reason I like to check if a key exists in an object this way is because now it even handles, like if you were to explicitly like if you were to give the value of that key like false or null, or even explicitly say that it's undefined, it will still give true, that the key is actually there. Yes, and then it needs, yeah, and then I guess if variant name in props and variants, variant name. Oh, sorry. If variant name in props and props variant name in variant name. Yes. So what we're checking is the variant name in the props, and is the value of the variant name, is that actually in the object here? So to take it from this point, first we check if size is in props, and if size is in props, we check if the let's do this just to be very explicit. So I say test size small. So what we do is that we check if size is in the props, and then we check if small is inside the object of size. And if it is, it means that we want to add evaluated variants, variant name, and then variants. Oh shit, we should make some this is going to yeah, so many variants. So evaluated variants, variant name, props, variant name. Yeah, I guess that's it. So we look into our evaluated variants, size, and then small. And that will hold the evaluated styling that we put into our compositions. And now we're happy. This is a brain twister. Okay, so what we have now is our composition. Like, the sad thing about this, I don't really have any tests in this library. Oh, do I? Wait, I do. I have tests. Oh, exactly. Oh. We'll see if we can get that running. But it's like the code isn't that complex. I have a tendency to just deploy it behind the tag and then test it and then kind of do a second round and then just fix it. But we should probably have some testing. But that maybe that fits really well. So now we kind of do our brute implementation, and then I'll make sure that the tests are running for tomorrow, and then we can actually check to see if everything's working. Okay. So what we're not taking into account here now is like, what if the props also has a class name? We're not handling that, which we definitely should. But now we're focusing on our now we have to focus on our variants. You need to move the CSS compose for class name after merging in the styles. Oh, yes. Good point. Good point. Yes. Or we would have always only composed in this one, of course. Cool. So what happens now is that we'll always have the base styling. If we find a variant in our props, we'll compose that. We will push those evaluated compositions into our final composition, and then we'll just compose it together, and that becomes our class name. Whoop. Yes. So I guess that's it. So what I'm kind of excited about is this memoizing stuff. So let's see. Maybe like what we could do next time, if you're up for it, Fabrice, is that we could do like a live stream together. That would be fun. But let's see here. Okay, so the point is that everything's static, meaning that all the work we do here, we don't really need to do all that work every time this component renders. Let's just do it one step at a time. Yeah, I would flip that approach. Yeah, maybe like if you're up for it, Fabrice, maybe we could like do a refactor session tomorrow if you have time. That would be a lot of fun. And then we can kind of refactor this into a more performant and probably much cleaner implementation as well. But yeah, let's just explore this memoization thing. If I remember this correctly, what I really just want to do for now is to make this variable memoized, so it only runs once. And we can do that by evaluated variants equals react use memo, and then this is a callback. So basically we could just do, yeah, we don't need, yeah, so we have the compositions here, but this composition will change based on the props. So I guess we can do, if we do this, and then we do this, return evaluated variant. Yeah, and then it probably complains about, I guess we need to do this. And then this is like a shadowed thing. Yeah. Naming stuff. Current evaluated variants. That's a little variable naming trick for you. Add current in front. Okay, so now we make sure that the first time this component renders, it does the creates the evaluated variants, and then it doesn't actually do that again. So that's at least one optimization. but then it does have to go through all the variants to or at least like go through the props to figure out which one of these variants should now be in the current composition, because that might change for each render. So I think that's pretty okay for now. Okay, again, we haven't been able to test this, but again, it shows kind of the way I do things. I typically just do a brute implementation first, because I need to learn like where are the points where I need to be more explicit. Like for example, this piece of code, it's really hard to reason about this, and I didn't really notice that before or until I started implementing it. And then in this case, we are prioritizing performance, but performance code typically it's more difficult to both write and read. So there's like a time for doing that, which is typically like a couple of steps in the implementation. But yeah, I think actually we should end here. So we implemented like the first version of this. We even got to a point where we optimized it with a memo. And I'll talk to Fabrice, and maybe he'll be able to join tomorrow, or at least we'll have some things we want to refactor for this. And then we'll just do that. And I'll make sure that I prepared some tests so that we can actually write some tests and run it. And I think that's pretty good. So after tomorrow, it should be ready. Also yesterday, because we talked about initially providing the object syntax. So you would do like, so this would actually be styled color red size. Ooh, font size, what are they, 2 pixels. That it would look like this instead. And actually I implemented this. I've suddenly got an idea how to add that to stitches, because I want to add it to the core first, and then we can like use it here. So I have some more work on that in the core. But yeah, we'll get that, or maybe I can just add that without documenting it, so that we can test it, because it's not like it doesn't break anything. It's an addition, so I can push that so we can test it. Yeah, and then allow the same API on styled. Cool. Yes, that's it for now. Thanks for following along and asking questions and stuff. I try to like keep in the flow, not interrupting myself too much. I might be ignoring some comments, so sorry about that. It's not because I don't think it's interesting or anything like that. But yeah, I kind of have to try to keep the flow of what I'm doing. And then if there's something there that mentions how we should do stuff differently, then we'll like do that in the next session. Cool. Yes, great. Have a great day, and hopefully I'll see you tomorrow, and then we will be able to test this thing. Cool. Bye-bye.